Number 23, the worst Pixar film is The Bad Dinosaur. If there was one Pixar film that I could snap out of existence, it would be The Good Dinosaur. Like, come on, this isn't Pixar, is it? This feels like a bad DreamWorks film. It's embarrassing how bad it is. Pixar nearly always has deeper meanings and underlying themes, while The Good Dinosaur has nothing valuable in it at all. Spot and Arlo are both pretty annoying, and you just don't get to care about a single thing they do. One positive might be the animation, but even then, the realistic backgrounds don't go with the cartoonish character designs. The entire film is just a disgrace to Pixar. It seemed like Inside Out was going to bring them back from their rough streak, but then they had to make this disaster the same year. At number 22, I have Toy Story 4. I actually strongly dislike Toy Story 4. First off, it is very unnecessary. Everyone's arcs were perfectly completed before this in Toy Story 3. But, that doesn't have anything to do with the actual film. Do you all remember the line that made the first 3 films so great?
Life's only worth living if you're being loved by a kid.
Toy Story 4 just completely abandons that line, because now Woody just leaves Bonnie. Yeah, I get it, Bonnie didn't need him anyway, but it just doesn't feel right. This movie sidelines every great character besides Woody. Alright, so they're focusing only on Woody, but what does he actually learn here? I guess he learned how to only care about himself rather than stick with Bonnie? Congratulations, Toy Story 4 ruined every character. Maybe I'm missing something here, but this movie really doesn't work for me. Coming in at number 21 is A Bug's Life. Everything about A Bug's Life is so aggressively mediocre that it becomes a bad film that I would never want to see again. There are way too many generic plot points and storylines, and it gets frustrating to watch. I guess Flick is an okay character sometimes, but also generic. He's almost exactly like characters we've seen countless times before. He's basically an outcast in his community because he has ideas of how to make things better, but people don't accept his ideas until the end, of course. Not all of this movie is bad. It actually has some great aspects, especially this phenomenal score that I somehow always forget about. But compared to Pixar's standards, A Bug's Life falls short in almost every way. Just look at the animation. It's easily the weakest out of any Pixar film. At number 20, I have Finding Dory. The Good Dinosaur is the worst Pixar movie all around. Toy Story 4 is how you mess up a franchise. A Bug's Life is extremely generic, but Finding Dory is the most unnecessary Pixar film. There was really no reason to make a film in the same world as Finding Nemo. Dory was probably one of the weaker characters in Finding Nemo, and so then they decided to bring her into the lead role. Some of the new characters are pretty decent, like Hank the Octopus, and the shell scene actually has a bit of emotion, but this entire film is unneeded. Besides a few scenes, the movie is useless. Pixar can do so much better than this. Is the film we got good enough? Yeah, I guess it is. But if you're gonna watch a Pixar movie, when are you ever gonna choose Finding Dory? Coming in at number 19 is going to be Brave. Like The Good Dinosaur, Brave doesn't really feel like a Pixar film. It's definitely not a bad movie to me, but it doesn't feel like anything special next to Pixar's great achievements. The animation and places look nice, but besides that, there's not a whole lot that interests me. The beginning is good, and Merida is set up to be a really good character. And then the bear plotline shows up, and it's not really clear if Merida actually gets a character arc in here. Her mom was a bear, but what purpose did that have? The humor is also pretty awful. It's pretty easily one of the least funny Pixar movies, and if there's any Pixar movie to call boring, it's probably this one. Brave is a film I personally can never really get into. It's just bland. At number 18 is Cars 2. Cars 2 is very stupid. After the first Cars film, which I really love, Cars 2 feels like the exact wrong direction for this franchise to go. After a charming story about Lightning getting rid of his ego, the sequel now stars Mater as the lead in a spy adventure, and now there's no purpose in them all being cars. I definitely understand all the hate this movie gets. Pixar was stupid to make a film like this, but Cars 2 is still very entertaining. It is not a good movie in any way, but there is some fun to be had here. I feel like every Pixar film up to 2010 was fantastic, and then Cars 2 sent them down the wrong path, and then the 2010s weren't as good for them. I do have some good memories of Cars 2, so that's why it's not all the way at the bottom. Surprisingly, number 17 is Incredibles 2. When Incredibles 2 first came out, I thought it was just as good as the original, and even last time I did a Pixar ranking, it was right up there in the top 10. But looking back, it doesn't have much that made the first Incredibles so great. I actually think some of the dialogue was even more interesting, like the conversations in the opening, and some people didn't like Screenslaver, but I actually thought that villain was pretty good. But the action wasn't as creative, the themes weren't as deep, and most of the movie just isn't nearly as well thought out as the first. And lastly, the new characters actually have awful character designs and are pretty pathetic overall. To be honest, this movie might have been higher if it wasn't a sequel, but since we're forced to compare the two, this film is pretty disappointing. 16 is going to be Monsters University. At first, this looks like another unnecessary Pixar addition, but I do think there's some great stuff in here. Sure, it seems like your generic school movie, most of the new characters are really forgettable, but there is some great character growth for Mike and Sully. While some people are telling you to follow your dreams because you can be whatever you want to be, Monsters University tells the more true lesson, which is that your life may not work out how you expect. For example, Mike wants to be a scarer, but he learns he's simply not meant for that, and Sully also learns that being a Sullivan doesn't make him automatically great. That's why the climax of Monsters University is actually really good. We didn't need a Monsters Inc. prequel, but I'm glad we have it. At number 15, I have Toy Story 2. I don't think this film is nearly as good as the original Toy Story. It expands the story and characters in a great way, though. It introduces amazing new characters like Jessie, Bullseye, and Stinky Pete. It also sends Woody's character in a new direction, and he's forced to consider if being in a museum would be good enough for him. They also start to explore what would happen once a kid grows up, but there's just something about Toy Story 2 that's not up on the level of some of the other films in the franchise. We had Woody with the Roundup Gang, which was pretty great, and Buzz leading a rescue mission, which was not as good. There's one scene in this film that's really sad, but I think the issue with it is it doesn't have much to think about afterward, while most Pixar movies do. 14 is Coco. Whoever thought that a movie about the land of the dead could be a great kids movie? Coco nails this really odd concept and tells a fantastic story about memory and remembering people. The music is also really great, especially at the end in the final scene, and the animation is some of the best in Pixar history. The Land of the Dead looks stunning. Miguel, Hector, and Mama Coco are all great characters, and I totally respect if you have Coco higher. For me, it just comes down to personal preference. You have to remember, Pixar is a fantastic studio. They've made so many great films, and Coco's just not one of my absolute favorites. But also, some of the themes don't really work for me. I don't connect with some parts of the movie, even while I do see that it's creative and well made. Number 13 is gonna be Cars 3. Yes, I have Cars 3 over Coco. Let me explain. Coco is no doubt a better movie. I don't even know if you can say Cars 3 is all that good, but I just personally really loved it. I have such a great connection to the Cars franchise, and after Cars 2 was a stupid spy adventure that ignored the first Cars, I think Cars 3 brought back the charm of the original. You could actually tell that there was effort behind Cars 3, and the writers wanted to make a good movie, even if you don't think the final product is good at all. The themes of Lightning moving on and passing the mantle are great. I love the idea of giving the race to Cruz Ramirez at the end. Unfortunately, it was executed very badly, but again, I appreciate that the people behind this film wanted to give the Cars movies a good ending. At number 12, I have WALL-E. I'm surprised at myself for not putting this in the top 10, but I don't have any other excuse besides it's Pixar. They have a ton of great movies. I know a lot of people have a really strong emotional connection to this film. I don't know if I've ever had that though. It's a good movie, it has great ideas, and exploring what the world is like in this version of the future was really interesting. I like how there's barely any dialogue for the first half, and it just focuses on the character of WALL-E. Then when we get into the second half, I'm even more interested, but I'm not sure if the two halves connected quite right for me. I appreciate how Wall-E tried to experiment. This is another Pixar film that wouldn't sound quite right on paper, but it really does work in the actual film. Just not my favorite. At number 11, unfortunately, is Finding Nemo. Maybe I just don't connect with Andrew Stanton's movies as much as everyone else. Once again, I see how this is a really good movie, but I've never been interested in this story or these characters. It's not the fault of the filmmaker. Again, it's just my personal preference. I find Dory to be a kind of annoying character throughout this film, while the other characters are definitely well done. Second to Up, this is one of the saddest openings in a Pixar film, when Nemo's mother and siblings are all killed, and that leads to Marlin never wanting Nemo out of his sight, and he gets a great character arc. I just don't love this film or connect with any of this story as much as parents surely will. In that way, it's one of those Pixar movies that has themes aimed toward adults, even while it is a kid's film. Cracking my top 10 is actually Onward. Onward was my favorite film of the first half of 2020. I actually think it's really great, and it's going to go on to be the most underrated Pixar film. The central relationship between Ian and Barley is fantastic, and their character arcs are so well done. The whole movie is about Ian finally getting to meet his father for the first time, but throughout the adventure, he realizes his brother was his father figure all along, and that truly was an amazing ending. Onward is a very relatable film, even when I haven't really been in a situation like Ian and Barley. A lot of people don't seem to like Onward that much, saying it's pretty average for Pixar, but I actually think it's Pixar getting right back on track. It really feels like classic Pixar to me, so I have it in my top 10. Coming in at number 9 is Ratatouille. Okay, here's the thing. A lot of people are still saying this film is underrated, but it's just not. It gets plenty of praise and love, and there are a ton of people who have this as one of their favorite Pixar movies. For me, it's not quite there. I really like it. It feels more grounded compared to a lot of these films, and has almost everything I like in a Pixar movie. It is a crazy concept of a rat pulling a guy's hair to help him cook, and Pixar is always good at taking insane concepts like that and making them work. But now I feel like I have to explain why this isn't in my top 5. Maybe it's the fact that I hadn't ever even seen Ratatouille until early this year. It was actually the only Pixar film that I hadn't seen before this year somehow. Anyway, this is a very good movie, it's just not top 5. Coming in at number 8 is the new Pixar film, Soul. Honestly, I could see Soul moving up or down in the coming months, because there's a whole lot to process, and I don't know exactly how I feel about it yet. I gotta say, I liked it even more on rewatch. There's a really good message in this film, but I didn't see that concluded in a great way by the ending. The ending overall just wasn't nearly as satisfying as I'd hoped, but I'd rather focus on what I loved. Soul is another great Pixar movie, and I do believe they've come out of their rough streak, and they're back on the right path. I love the characters of Soul. We have another pair of opposites, as Joe Gardner needs to get back to Earth, while 22 never wants to go to Earth. Possibly my favorite parts of the film were when 22 is learning what she actually likes about life. Pete Docter made another very thoughtful film with Soul, and while it is my least favorite of his films, unfortunately, I still really enjoyed it, and much like Inside Out, it's very ambitious, and I think it definitely pays off. Number 7 is gonna be Toy Story 3. This used to be my favorite Toy Story film, and it's really good, but I think I've just seen it a few too many times, and it moved down just a little. Toy Story 3 has a fantastic jailbreak kind of plot, and easily has the best villain in the franchise, Lotso. Lotso's a fantastic twist villain who you kind of feel bad for sometimes. The best parts of the film, though, are the parts involving Andy. They took the themes from Toy Story 2 about what toys do when their owner doesn't use them anymore, but this film expanded that and made it so much better. When Andy is grown up, what purpose do the toys serve? And the ending when Andy gives the toys away is one of the most emotional scenes in Pixar, and it concluded the trilogy in a perfect way. The Toy Story franchise definitely should have ended here. Number 6 is the one that started it all, and that is Toy Story. The original Toy Story is now my favorite in the franchise. I've decided it's a bit better than Toy Story 3. I think we can all be thankful for the original Toy Story for starting out Pixar so well and giving us so many iconic characters. Woody and Buzz are the classic duo of Pixar, and they are both amazing characters. Woody starts out as the jealous guy who won't accept when Buzz becomes the favorite toy, and Buzz starts out thinking he's a real space ranger, but both of them are humbled and get phenomenal character arcs. Toy Story is just a simple story exploring what toys would do if they were alive, but it's interesting and charming and started out Pixar so incredibly well. Animation as a whole would be nowhere near where it is today without Toy Story. And making my top 5 is Inside Out. This might be Pixar's craziest concept yet. Who would think that exploring the emotions in our heads as characters would make for a good film? Inside Out has such a creative world to go through. I love the message of this film, that kids will understand and take away from it, that it's okay to cry and it's a healthy thing to be sad once in a while. The visuals are also really creative, like the islands of personality, and all the different parts of the brain that joy and sadness travel to. This is one of the saddest Pixar movies. The ending is fantastic, and it also might be one of the funniest Pixar movies.
Triple income will make you smile.
Inside Out was gonna bring Pixar back to what they do best, but then they made The Good Dinosaur the same year. This film is ambitious and risky, and it absolutely works. In 4th place is The Incredibles. A couple months ago, I thought The Incredibles was overrated, but all I needed was a good rewatch to realize how great this film really is. It took me a while to really find out what made this film so good, because I loved it, but I couldn't put into words why it was so good. And it's not because it's superheroes. It's just such a smart and complete movie. Every scene and line of dialogue matters for the story and comes back later. Every character gets a little bit of an arc, and not a single one is weak. Add to all of that, The Incredibles has themes that you'd never expect from a kid's movie. For example, the opening when somebody actually attempts to kill himself. So going back to why this film is actually so good, simple. It doesn't make mistakes. It's basically a flawless movie. Taking 3rd place is Up. Up has by far the best opening of any Pixar film. I can imagine how unexpected it was when we see the first 10 minutes already make people cry. Everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say that. Up is the most emotional Pixar movie, and yes, a lot of that is due to the sad opening, but I also found the ending to be just as good. When Carl opens the scrapbook and realizes Ellie added to it, it's a mind-blowing ending. Carl promised Ellie years ago that he would take them to Paradise Falls, and though they never got to do that together, Ellie assures Carl that they had their great adventure, and that's just a beautiful ending and message. Now, the rest of the adventure with Russell, Kevin, and Doug, I must admit is not quite as good, but still very entertaining. My very controversial runner-up is Cars. Let me get this out of the way. I have insane amounts of nostalgia for Cars. It came out the year I was born, and I've always loved this movie. So I was horrified when I saw that people didn't like it very much, and then some people were saying they used to love it until they rewatched it. So I was really scared to rewatch, but I'm happy to say I still believe Cars is a fantastic movie. I will never understand why people dislike it. It truly has some great things to say. While it is about these cars trying to win a race, the themes are actually very human. Lightning gets lost in Radiator Springs, which is the last place he wants to be, but there he learns how to care for other people besides himself. And Cars is truly an underrated film, and just the simple message of valuing other lives ahead of your own is a really important one. While you might find the characters annoying or the story boring, I think it's all well done. And my all-time favorite Pixar movie is Monsters, Inc. This might be the most creative movie that I have ever seen. It blows my mind how clever the concept and idea of this movie is. It takes an idea that everyone's familiar with about that monster in your closet, and I just love what they do with that. It's flipped on its head because the monsters aren't scaring these kids just because. No, they're nice characters and they're only doing their job. I only hope I can think of an idea as good as this someday. Monsters, Inc. is in my top 5 favorite movies ever made, mostly because of the pure creativity that went into the movie. If you want my more in-depth thoughts, go check out my video essay on the movie, where I explain why I really love it so much. What I'll say here is that Mike and Sully are the best Pixar duo to me. They're just so great. So, there you have it. Monsters, Inc. is my favorite Pixar movie.